Next, we'll hear from Dr. Kevin Chatham-Stephens, Pediatric Environmental Health Fellow, Mount Sinai School of Medicine.
Good morning.
Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for inviting me here today. Like you said, my name is Kevin Chatham-Stephens, and I am a pediatrician completing an Environmental Health Research Fellowship at Mount Sinai under the supervision of Dr. Phil Landrigan and Dr. Maida Galvez, two leaders in the field of environmental pediatrics. As a pediatrician, I'm really, as a pediatrician focused on the environmental determinants of children's health, I'm here to advocate for the inclusion of children's health in our society's current discussion regarding natural gas extraction. I was actually quite pleased to see that I am not only not the sole pediatrician in this list of 10 individuals. There are 2 pediatricians as well as 2 endocrinologists, a toxicologist, a psychiatrist, in addition to all the PhDs. So I think you guys did a fantastic job of getting a diverse group out of 10 individuals, including members from the public health field and from industry, which I think in this complicated topic is definitely needed. So we know that children differ fundamentally from adults in multiple ways, which places them at a higher risk of exposure to toxic chemicals. In medical school, we are constantly reminded of these differences with the statement, children are not little adults. And I know that might seem obvious, but for decades in the field of toxicology and medicine, those differences weren't really fully realized. And I'll just go through some of the reasons why they are different. On a pound per pound of body weight comparison, children actually consume more food and water than adults, which can result in them consuming relatively higher amounts of pesticides from food or lead from drinking water. Due to their faster breathing rate, their lungs may be exposed to air pollutants to a greater degree than adults. In addition, the detoxification processes in infants and children are oftentimes immature compared to adults. And perhaps most importantly, the fetus, infant, and child each proceed through crucial, highly programmed developmental stages, each of which is uniquely vulnerable to disruption by a variety of toxics. And unfortunately, history is littered with examples of toxic substances being used or liberated without sufficient knowledge of their safety profile and long-term health effects. Lead, for example, was used for decades in paint and in gasoline before its permanent negative impact on development and cognition in children was understood. If you look at the history of mercury, it proceeds in a similar fashion. It's also very well known as a potent neurotoxicant. Our children and society overall continue to pay the price for these toxic substances with reduced IQ, impaired attention, and poor reading skills. Understanding these historical examples and the unique vulnerability of the fetus and child to environmental toxic exposures helps frame the discussion regarding regarding potential health impacts from natural gas extraction. So from my standpoint, there seem to be 4 major potential routes of exposure, potential routes of threat to our health from natural gas extraction. And they are potential contamination of drinking water, potential increased local air pollution, potential increased noise pollution, and then potentially mental health effects as well. I think the first 2 have been covered quite well by the previous 2 speakers, so I'll truncate my testimony on those 2 topics and focus on the last. So just to begin with, the establishment of clean, unpolluted, easily accessible drinking water was a public health victory that resulted in significant reductions in morbidity and mortality. Natural gas extraction, from the drilling process to the hydraulic fracturing and management of wastewater, presents a potential threat to this significant achievement. Recent investigations have begun to confirm the anecdotal reports of private drinking water well contamination. In addition to the Osborne study that was just mentioned, in December of last year, the US EPA concluded that elevated methane levels in 2 private drinking water wells in Parker County, Texas, were due, at least in part, to nearby natural gas drilling. And as children consume relatively larger amounts of water and have a longer life expectancy than adults, they may be more vulnerable to toxic exposures from drinking water. And I echo the previous speakers when I state that systematic prospective studies are needed to adequately address this issue. So moving on to local air pollution. Due to multiple factors, including their faster breathing rates, ongoing lung maturation, and higher prevalence of asthma, children are uniquely susceptible to increases in air pollution. Over the past several decades, the prevalence of asthma in children has steadily increased, many for reasons that we don't fully understand at this point. Since ground-level ozone and many of the products of diesel fuel combustion have been linked to asthma, respiratory symptoms, and various other health effects, the impact of potentially exposing more children to these air pollutants should be examined. So now, like I mentioned, I cut short my testimony on those two subjects. And I'll talk about two that I don't think have gotten as much publicity as they should. So I'll start off with noise pollution. While historically not studied to the degree as air pollution or environmental toxicants, the impact of noise pollution has recently become a focus of many researchers and public health authorities. The World Health Organization labels noise pollution as, quote, not only an environmental nuisance, but also a threat to public health, end quote. The WHO estimates that approximately 1 million healthy life years are lost each year in Western Europe due to noise from traffic, while other research has shown that airport noise adversely affects academic performance in children. With drilling occurring relatively close to houses and schools in certain parts of the country, such as Texas and Pennsylvania, the potential for increased noise levels should be addressed also in a systematic fashion. So regarding mental health effects, research has shown that children and adolescents are at risk for mental health disorders such as PTSD, anxiety, and depression following a variety of disasters, including shooting sprees, terrorist attacks, and natural events such as hurricanes or tornadoes. Therefore, the potential impact of explosions and spills on children's mental health should be addressed and adequate supports provided in the unfortunate scenario of such a disaster. Many families that I've talked to also endure stress and anxiety regarding the uncertainty surrounding natural gas extraction, especially the concern of drinking water contamination and changes to their local communities. To be comprehensive, any prospective health study that's done on this issue should include assessments of mental health and quality of life. So whether it is water contamination, increased air noise pollution, or mental health effects, children are uniquely susceptible to health threats in their environment. More vigorous research into the impact of hydraulic fracturing has been urged by a variety of groups. While the ongoing EPA study of the life cycle of water through the process of natural gas extraction will address one potential route of exposure, additional studies are needed for a comprehensive evaluation of air pollution, noise pollution, and mental health effects. It is imperative that the health effects of pregnant women, infants, and children are adequately studied in order to weigh the potential benefits and risks from natural gas extraction. Thank you.